Yesterday, Obama, he did an interview on Snapchat. He did a Snapchat interview, actually, on Good Luck America, hosted by Peter Hamby. And it's very interesting what he said. What he said was that, when you say defund the police, he said, what you're doing is you're really turning off a lot of Americans. And what he said is, but if you instead say, let's reform the police department so that everyone's being treated fairly, divert young people from getting into a crime, and if there's a homeless guy, maybe we can send a mental health worker there instead of an armed unit. Suddenly a whole bunch of folks who might not otherwise listen to you are listening to you. So he was very, very critical of the George Floyd movement. He was very, very critical of the defund the police movement. And this is from an extraordinarily prominent, Democrat, former President Barack Obama, saying that defund the police, in essence, caused the Democrats to lose Congress, which they did. And, the reality of the election that just happened, the Democrats didn't win anything because the Republicans gained seats in the House of Representatives. They held on to the Senate. And, 6 months ago, everybody was talking about the Democrats are going to run the Senate. They're going to run the House of Representatives. The only election they won, in reality, they could win. There's still 2 Senate races still going on in Georgia. Okay, so it could still end up 50-50 Democrat-Republican. But the reality is the only race they won was President Biden beating Trump, which, if you look at it from 10,000 feet up in the air, what it says is people hated Trump, but they didn't hate the Republicans.
Right.
That's real. A majority of people enough people hated Trump that they voted for Biden, but they didn't hate Republicans.
Yeah.
And, what Obama's saying is the Democrats didn't get enough people to love him. And he feels, at least Obama feels, defund the police was a problem. Now, progressive Congressman Ilhan Omar, she disagreed with President Obama's characterization of defund the police. She said on Twitter, "We lose people in the hands of police. It's not a slogan, it's a policy demand. And centering the demand for equitable investments and budgets for communities across the country get us progress and safety." Fellow squad member Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts tweeted criticism of Obama. She said, "The murderers of generations of unarmed black folks by police have been horrific. Lives are at stake daily, so I'm out of patience with critiques of the language of activists." Now, while Obama didn't take a position on the movement itself, other leading Democrats have. So in other words, he didn't say he has a problem with defund the police. He has a problem with the words that are being used because it turns off a lot of the voters.
Wait,
now,
what word? I thought it was defund.
Defund the police means to most people reform the police. That's what it means. I guess there's a few people who say there should be no police. I don't believe when you say defund the police. Okay, there is an opinion of many people who voted for Republicans that defund the police means we have no police. Everybody just runs amok, and that scares a lot of people.
That would be horrible.
That would be horrible. So I don't think. Maybe there's a few people who really believe that. But I would say a vast majority, I don't know whether it is 95, 98, 99, maybe even 100% of people believe defund the police means reform the police. But when words matter and words can get twisted, okay? So when people say defund the police, people believe who voted Republican, suburbanites, people who live in cities, it doesn't matter where. They said defund the police. I need the police. I want to be protected. What is this defund the police?
That's what on YouTube, Fox Racing said just that. She writes, "Please don't defund the police. The first thing people do when something happens to them, they quickly dial 911."
So now, other Democrats kind of believe what Obama believes. House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn told CBSN last month that it was a topic he and the late civil rights leader and Congressman John Lewis discussed. He said John Lewis, who, by the way, was right there in Selma, Alabama, leading the marches during the 1960s civil rights movement. John Lewis and I were very concerned when those slogans came out about defund the police. We sat together on the House floor and we talked about how that slogan could undermine the Black Lives Matter movement, just as Burn, Baby Burn destroyed our movement back in the 1960s. Words matter. People have gone to war using words. And by the way, I'll give you my opinion. I'll let you guys wax poetically in a second. Minnesota Democrat Ilhan Omar, you can't disagree. Yeah, we want a policy that's centered on equitable investments and budgets in communities. And, maybe if there's a homeless person, it shouldn't be a police officer going to deal with the homeless. Maybe we should have homeless outreach and more money given to the homeless. Those are policies that are beyond my expertise. Okay, I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know enough about it. I do know that we got a lot of cops and a lot of cops with a lot of big guns and military that we don't need. So so maybe some of that could be, but when you say defund the police, nobody's arguing with, at least I'm not arguing with Ilhan Omar, when we want equitable investments in our communities. Sounds right to me. But when you say defund the police, you're telling people, it's the title of your book. Nobody's going to read your book. This is what Obama's saying. Nobody's going to read your book. If you title the book, Defund the Police, nobody's going to pick up the book and read the fine print. What does defund the police mean? And you could easily say, let's reform the police.
Yeah,
that could be the title of the book, Reform the Police.
Yeah.
Nobody could argue with reform the police. So, I think my opinion, and everyone could disagree, and everyone has a right to an agreement. I think Ilhan Omar and Ayanna Pressley, I think they're stupid. And I'll tell you, I'll tell you why I think they're stupid. Not because.
It's a strong word.
It's a word. Yeah, it is a strong word. I'll tell you why. Not because they're wrong in what they're saying. Because you can't argue they're wrong in what they're saying. Yes, there's, generations of cops who murdered blacks in the name of the law when they shouldn't have been murdered. Absolutely. Nobody disagrees with anything that they're saying in their details. But as congresswomen, and you got to understand that what politicians do. Politicians are the art of persuasion and compromise. You can't persuade anybody, defund the police. It's not going to happen. Napoleon had a very good saying. He was a very famous general. He said, lose the battle, win the war. You're trying to win the battle and you're trying to win the war. Mm-hmm. Let's not win the battle, let's win the war. The war is to reform the police and make them something what we want them to be. But when you say defund the police... I
don't know why I never thought of completely disappearing the police.
But that's what people believe. And you just even... And why I say they're stupid is the congresswomen, they know people believe that. So let's use words that can persuade people to come to our side rather than push them away. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that there are details inside the book. You read the book, yeah, I agree with them. But no one's going to pick up the book and they're arguing about, no, we're not going to change what we're saying. I'm not going to change it. And they should, because you want to persuade people to come over. And the proof is in the pudding, because the Democrats lost the election, really, other than Biden. They lost the election. In any other given year, when you have 300,000 people dying of coronavirus potentially by February, 20% unemployment, to lose an election, that's unheard of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
that's my opinion.
The reason why, no, and I honestly agree with your opinion of not defunding the police. I can see why, they are so mad, because I mean, the history of policing in the U.S. was established to maintain white supremacy. So, just knowing that was the history, and to see how history has just kept revolving, I can see why you're so, they would be so passionate about defunding the police. But me personally, like you were saying, I would not just take out the police, all the way. I think that the police definitely needs to change the culture. They need, like we said, reform. But defunding the police, that means when you call 911, who's gonna come and get you? Like there's gonna be a long wait for people to come and get you. Defunding the police wouldn't abolish crime. If it's not gonna abolish crime, then why would you do that? So I understand why we're so, when I say we, us as Black people, are so just mad at the history of policing. But defunding, no, I don't agree with. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, but you got to use the right words.
Yeah.
In other words, you're our leader. You're a congresswoman. You're our leader. You're not some guy or woman in the street arguing on the street corner. You're our leader. And we want our leaders to give us change. And when our leaders are using words that are pushing people away from the change we want, you're losing the battle and winning. You're trying to win the battle, and you're trying to win the war.
Yeah.
And you can't win the battle and win the war, okay? Me personally, who cares what they call it? Call it Pigs Fly in the Winter. Who cares what the name of the book is? As long as we ultimately get what we want, which is a fair and equitable police department. Maybe the cops aren't the best people to be taking care of homeless people. Maybe the cops aren't the best people, honestly, they're not, to be giving people speeding tickets. You know how many people get shot getting pulled over with a speeding ticket? Maybe cops aren't the best people to come to a domestic dispute unless there's guns and knives involved. Maybe not. Certainly cops should be.
I never thought about taking them out of different, I've never had this conversation before where you remove police from certain, certain situations.
Correct.
That makes perfect sense.
Correct.
I don't know why with all this defund the police, I understood that it was, slogans and protests against the police, but I never saw a world with no police at all.
But that's what people believe. Okay? So in other words, Fox News, okay? You go back to the protests of George Floyd. Okay? You go back to the protests of George Floyd, and then after the protests of George Floyd, remember we saw some people, a small limited group of people on certain nights, they were looting stores.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And you know what Fox News says? You know what people in suburbia say? This is what they want. All of these the protesters didn't want that. It's not what the protesters want.
Right.
The protesters wanted an equitable, fair. They wanted fairness. They wanted police to treat Yo-Yo and me equal. And Vanessa equal.
Yeah.
And the squad equal.
Yeah, so that's my thing. The authority, the position, the power. So I agree with Yo-Yo in terms of, yes, we need to reform policies, statement, exactly.
We all agree. We all agree to that. Nobody's
The
disagreeing.
only thing
But in other words,
for so long and nothing's been happening.
Of course, but in other words, people see the looting, and then in Fox News, well, this is what the defund police movement wants. They want this to be every day, looting, no police. So it has to be explained.
Part of the time that the police was actually behind the looting as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, you could go. It doesn't really matter. That's not the point. The point is you want people to agree with your point of view. And when you tell people defund the police, the first belief will be there are no police. And it's a misnomer. The title of the book and what you want is two different things. And I believe as congresswomen, as congressmen, as politicians who are making decisions for us, and we want this change to happen, I don't care what you call it. Who cares what we call it as long as the change happens? And they're fighting with, no, we're not going to change the name of this. We're calling it Defund the Police because I'm tired of all of this and we're angry. Okay, yeah, we're all angry. But let's lose the battle and win the war. Let's call it what it is. Reform the police. Get people to our side. That's
Don Harriet said she felt like when he called it a slogan, that's what got a lot of people mad.
Why?
With him calling it a slogan.
Obama.
Yes.
That it got a lot of people mad because it's a slogan.
Yeah.
Why did that get people mad? It is a slogan.
Because I guess it's supposed to. It was supposed to represent a movement. It's supposed to represent a movement
instead of a slogan,
of it taking action. Yeah, instead of it just, when one says a slogan, it just kind of sounds like a saying rather than something that will get done. So I don't know. That's me playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, but it ended up on Fox News as a slogan. It ended up as Fox. It wasn't a movement. It was.
I will say though.
Yeah, go ahead.
They were very smart in terms of marketing. This interview was done on Snapchat. Younger audiences, people easily influenced by this information. Correct.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the online marketer in me. So
that is
there is action being taken.
That is very, very true. I'm just
to have the conversation.
I am, to reiterate, I'm all in favor of all of this, but I want it to get done.
Right.
So I don't want to sit here and scream and yell about it and say I'm angry. I'm a doer. I want to get it done. And I say this to my clients all the time. Lose the battle, win the war. Withdraw this case, let's file this. You'll get a green card. Why are we fighting this out when you can walk down the street and walk through a door? Why are we climbing a fence? I mean, you could say 100 different ways to do it. So if that words, defund the police, make people believe no police, and it's going to push people away from voting for Democrats who actually want to get reform, then let's change what we're saying. That's all Obama's saying. Mm-hmm. That's right. And when these congresswomen say, no, we're not going to change it, we're going to continue to say it, the Democrats are going to continue to lose. Meanwhile, Obama, back in the news again.
Yeah.
He's really causing a lot of conversation here.
A lot of hoopla.
Yeah, he said he is going to take the coronavirus on television to show everybody how safe it is. He said on SiriusXM's Joe Madison that if Fauci tells him the vaccine is safe and can immunize you from getting COVID, absolutely, I'm going to take it. George Bush, Bill Clinton told CNN that they're also willing to be inoculated on television. All three living former presidents are hoping to instill confidence in the vaccines once authorized for use in the United States. Dr. Fauci has said the United States could have herd immunity by the end of the summer if people get vaccinated. George Bush's chief of staff, Freddie Ford, told CNN that the former president asked him to let Fauci and White House coronavirus task force coordinator Deborah Birx know that when the time is right, he wants to do what he can to help encourage his fellow citizens to get vaccinated. Ford said, first, the vaccines need to be deemed safe and administered to the priority populations. Then President Bush will get in line for his and will do it on camera. Clinton's spokesperson also said he would do it on camera. So
I heard this on the news today.
Yeah, all three former presidents will do it. The one president who said they're not going to do it or haven't heard from him, crybaby.
Right.
Crybaby has not said anything about it because I don't know what his deal is. Maybe he thinks, it'll make him look weak, or I don't know. I don't know what his deal is. I think ultimately everyone's going to end up taking it. Yeah.
One could never really understand or even guess what this guy is thinking. But I didn't even hear about this. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. But just them saying that they would take it publicly makes me feel a little bit better about this vaccine.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie.
Yeah.
So Fox Racing in the YouTube chat has said this entire time that even if mandatory, she wouldn't be taking the vaccine.
He's not going to do it.
Yeah.
Even if it was mandatory,
Okay.
they're not taking it.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah, even if it was mandatory, they wouldn't take it.
All right, let's see what happens.
Yeah, you got to listen. You got to respect it.
Yeah. Well, in the United States now, over 14 million people have been diagnosed with COVID, 274,000 deaths. More than 5.3 million people have recovered. On Wednesday, more than 200,000 new coronavirus infections were reported nationwide. The number of people in the hospital for COVID is over 100,000 people are right now in the hospital with coronavirus.
Dang.
That's nearly double the high point in the spring when we were all closed down. The New York Times reports the United States recorded its greatest daily death toll ever yesterday, 2,760 people dead. That's almost yesterday, okay? Almost approaching, but not exactly, but almost approaching the number of people who died in 9/11 at the World Trade Center site.
Wow.
And look what we did to mobilize in America because of that.
Yeah.
Nobody's doing nothing here. Nobody's doing nothing here.
Which makes you think why.
Every time we pull up this map, look at the can we pull that back up? Like, look at the world.
Yeah.
Like, we're so red.
Yeah.
Africa is where you need to be at, y'all.
Dr. Robert Redfield, he's the head of the CDC. He said by the end of February, 450,000 Americans are estimated to die.
What?
Wow.
450,000 Americans.
It's Americans. It's not even around the world.
Yes. But he did offer some hope. And his hope is if you wear a mask, less people will die, including yourself. It's the only thing you have to protect yourself. Now, eventually, when a vaccine is available in the United States, the Department of Defense says they're going to start immunizing people. And then people who get immunized are going to get a card to walk around and show they were vaccinated.
Wow.
Yeah. In Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and federal public health officials have said most Canadians are not expected to be vaccinated until September or even late December 2021. The sluggish timeline has bred exasperation and could prove Trudeau's doom as a politician in Canada. Meanwhile, Facebook stepping up to the plate in one respect, and they are removing all posts. They're not even putting disclaimers. They're literally removing any post that contains any claim that the COVID-19 vaccine is going to do something that has not been approved by public health experts. This is part of the social media network's efforts to act more aggressively to combat coronavirus misinformation while falsehoods run rampant. Facebook says it plans to take down COVID-19 vaccine falsehoods entirely if the claims have been discredited or contradicted by health groups, including the World Health Organization, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the Centers for Disease Control. Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook's founder and chief executive, has made it clear he does not want to be the arbiter of truth of what is posted on his site. But in this particular instance, he is going to be the arbiter of truth.
I mean, it makes sense. Like Nesquik said about Snapchat, Facebook is, I mean, you know, of course you have people of all ages, but it's really catered to, you know, the youth.
In Lyon, France, we're starting in Lyon, France. The French chef Benoît Bruel has created a record-breaking pizza with over 250 cheeses. Bruel said that he is compelled to raise the bar after learning that Australia held the previous record of 154 different cheeses. 250 cheeses. You do not have to worry, Yo-Yo, about COVID. You could just eat the pizza and drop dead of a heart attack.
Right.
I mean, that's basically it. 250 cheeses.
Is that the pizza?
That is the pizza, I guess.
How the hell you think 250 different cheeses
I don't
in
know.
a small pan?
Nah.
The cheese,
Nah, that's
the
way
cheese,
too much cheese for
the
me.
cheese
Way too
man
much cheese.
clocked in at over 1.5 pounds of cheese. It took
my
over
God.
2 hours, 2 hours to make. Now, a full list of cheese varieties used to dress the substantial pie was not published, but Bruel claims in the video that each package of cheese cost about $4, meaning they spent about $1,000 on cheese.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Now, crossing the border to Austria, residents of an Austrian village will ring in the new year under a new name, Fugging, after ridicule of their signposts, especially on social media. Yeah, they finally grew weary of Fugging, its current name, which some experts say dates back to the 11th century. Can you imagine? I live in the Fugging town. We should have saved this for Hump Day.
That's a real.
That's a real
what
town.
It was actually called.
Yeah,
Wow.
but now they're changing it from Fugging to Fugg. Now it's just Fugging hell. The village, with a population of 100 and located east of Vienna, will be named Fugging beginning January 1st.
This is in Turkey?
What?
Where is it?
This is in Austria.
Where is this?
In Austria, east of Vienna. Now, the increasing numbers of English-speaking tourists have made it a point of stopping there. It has become a tourist destination for English-speaking tourists to take a picture of the sign. Finally, a majority of the villagers says, these fucking tourists! We gotta change our fucking name! And we're now going to call it Fugging.
And now we gotta block it. Imagine driving into the town of, I drove right past, the F-town.
You can just go, you can go, oh, yeah, I'm in this fucking town.
I hate this fudging town.
This fucking town is great.
Or if you love it there, right?
Yeah. Meanwhile, going back to France, we're just going back and forth between Austria and France. A primary school in Avignon, France, has had to issue warnings to parents to stop throwing their children over a 6-foot fence to avoid being late for school. The primary school has recently had a number of parents who have hoisted their children over the 6-foot fence rather than getting marked tardy for an 8:30 a.m. start time. While this has not been a widespread practice, it's happened enough that parents are tossing their little toddlers over the fence that the school principal had to get involved. The school posted signage back in September asking parents, don't throw your kids over the damn fence. Now, while the signs have helped to discourage the practice, the school plans to keep them up as a way to remind parents that throwing one's kids over the fence is not terribly safe. What do you think? Is that good parenting, Vanessa? Throwing your child over the fence to make sure they're not late for school.
Like what? That is a savage move.
It depends.
Did he make it okay? Who cares? He was on time.
What they did the night before. To me, it depends on what they did the night before.
A tequila bar. We have to end Wacky World News with a tequila bar story from the United Kingdom. This tequila bar, they got closed down because the United Kingdom has closed down all of the pubs and bars around the entire United Kingdom because of COVID. So this tequila bar is now getting around the strict coronavirus restrictions by registering the bar as a church. James Aspel posted photos of his formal application to make his shirted 400 Rabbits Tequila and Mezcal cocktail bar in Nottingham, England, an official place of meeting for religious worship. He was also shown smiling and giving the thumbs up while mailing the form for the now reverently named Church of the 400 Rabbits. To get approved, he needs people to sign up and say they are part of his congregation, telling Nottingham Live that they can register as a bunny believer or a reverend of the righteous rabbits. He explained on Facebook, with places of worship allowed to open in all tiers, we thought, F it, let's start a religion. Aspel says that while it was started as a joke, it comes from a serious place, his anger over the hypocrisy of strict lockdowns. He said, this time of year, it's usually all guns blazing, but instead I'm at home putting my Christmas decorations up. He admits that even if his house of worship application gets approved, he would likely not be allowed to serve booze. Instead, Aspel hopes to adopt in a different way and have some fun with it. And people seem excited. One patron wrote, "The only reason I'd take up a religion I'm in," while another said, "I want to worship at the Church of Mezcal." And another wrote, "You might just save 2020. So what do you think, Yo-Yo? Would you join the Church of Tequila, Mezcal?
No.
No. You don't want to worship the tequila bottle.
No.
Yeah.
I
don't love tequila that.
Do you know what I would say? They said the parishioners can call themselves they can call themselves bunny believers, for joining this religion. I would tend to call them alcoholics.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're joining the religion of tequila bar, I don't think you're a bunny believer. I just think you're a damn alcoholic.
An alcoholic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. For more Brad Show Live, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.